The scripture reading this evening will be taken from the book of John. If you'd like to open up to the book of John, chapter 15, we'll begin in verse 18. John 15, verse 18. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you.
Above me is a picture of a family of manatees, otherwise known as the sea cow. These 1,000-pound, 10-foot-long, fully aquatic marine mammals are known to frequent the waters of many areas in Florida, and our rivers, our lakes, and our springs. These animals are so beloved here in the state of Florida that it is a law that you can't touch them. It's illegal to touch a manatee. If you try to do it, you will be arrested. A man learned this the hard way. He was out swimming, there was a baby manatee, and he hugged it. He took a picture of himself hugging it with his two daughters. And the authorities came to his house, arrested him. He had to post $2,500 bond. And the penalty for doing so is $500 and/or a 6-month stay in jail. So the point is, people love this animal for reasons that I don't understand, because I have a fear of manatees. I don't like them. I'm afraid of manatees. We all have different things that we're afraid of. You can take it down if you want. It's scary. We all have different things that we are afraid of. Some have a fear of heights. Some have a fear of small spaces. Some people have a fear of the unknown. Some people are scared of bees or spiders or whatever it may be. We all have our little fears. Some may be more rational than others, but we have our fears. I have a fear of manatees. Ever since I swam in the Indian River and a manatee tried to come up and shake my hand under the water, and it scared me, and from that day, I've had a fear of manatees. You may laugh and think, wow, well, that is a silly fear to have, and you probably are correct in saying that, but there are many things in this world that cause us to be afraid. There are many things that people find to be fearful of. Satan is in this world, and he's seeking who he can devour. And fear is one of his greatest tools. There's so much insanity going on in this world today. We have wars, ISIS, Ebola, conflicts, persecution, violence, crime, shootings, sickness, human trafficking, earthquakes, plane crashes, terrorism, economic disasters, unemployment, cancer, death, and the list could just go on and on and on. And hearing things like this, it makes us feel so anxious. It makes us feel overwhelmed. It makes us feel tense. Our thoughts spin out of control in all different directions. And probably why this is such a great battle tactic, why Satan uses fear, is because fear renders us completely ineffective. Fear leaves us powerless sometimes. It leaves us weak, like the deer caught in the headlights. Fear wastes our time, and it zaps our energy completely. Satan's main goal is being accomplished through this one controlling device, with fear. With fear, Satan attempts to effectively steal from our days. He kills our hopes, and he destroys our sense of freedom in this world. Fear is such a powerful weapon that he uses against us each and every day. And for many of us, most of us really, we all have smartphones, and it's getting harder for us every single day. You know, we're wired to our electronic devices that never allow us to miss a single thing. We carry a lot on our shoulders each and every day, and constantly these images replay over and over in our minds and in the media. All the things that are going on in this country and around the world. We take it all in, this steady media flow, and again, our anxieties, they can swirl. We worry, and it's hard sometimes. Sometimes our faith begins to wane because we see so many things, and it does cause us to fear. Yet reality tells us that much of what we spend time and energy fearing and worrying about really won't ever happen. The next time I go to swim in the Indian River, although I'm not likely to do so, but if I were to do so, I don't expect a manatee to come up and to harass me again. The spider that's sitting on the other side of the room most likely isn't going to run across and try to attack you. The next time you're on an airplane and there's turbulence that's going on, well, most likely that airplane is not going to fall from the sky, although your fear of heights, it will tell you otherwise. Living under the weight of life's what-ifs is a hard place to dwell, and that's where Satan wants us to dwell. He wants us to live in a state of fear. Satan is crafty in using this powerful weapon, this weapon of fear, to distract us from living that happy life that we talked about this morning. Happy lives are attainable through working hard and learning to suffer well. And this evening, we're going to explore some of the things that we as Christians don't need to fear. And at the conclusion, we're going to explore some of the things that we do need to fear. The goal is, hopefully by the end of this evening, we'll be able to we won't have to listen to the deception of fear that Satan poses before us. We'll be more immune to falling victim to fear's paralyzing grasp. One of the most powerful fears that I believe Satan promotes in this world is the fear of rejection. The fear that people won't accept you for one or more reasons. The fear that maybe they won't accept your opinions. Maybe they won't accept your values. Maybe they won't accept your beliefs. This is a very debilitating fear. One that it has affected myself, and I'm sure affects each and every one of you that are here this evening in one way or another. But as Christians, we should not find ourselves being paralyzed with the fear of rejection. To overcome any fear, we must first gain the proper perspective and the proper clarity to view the fear with. To do this, we must ask ourselves two questions. Whose rejection do I fear, and why? Whose rejection do I fear, and why? Jesus' words in John chapter 15, in verse 18, beginning there, I think will help us gain the proper perspective and clarity about the fear of rejection. So again, let's look at John chapter 15, and we'll begin at verse 18. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would have no sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. He who hates me hates my Father also. Again, whose rejection do you fear? Jesus is telling his disciples here that they will be rejected. They will be persecuted. They will be hated because Jesus was hated first, because they hate Jesus. And if we choose to follow Jesus today, we're going to be rejected just the same. If you're comfortable or you feel at home in this world, then I think you need to carefully examine your relationship with God, because we will face rejection, but we don't have to be afraid of it, as long as we have this proper perspective. Whose rejection do you fear, and why? Do you fear the rejection of your coworkers? Do you fear the rejection of your friends? Do you fear the rejection of your neighbors? If so, why? Why are you fearing these things? Jesus tells us to expect it. Expect the rejection. I believe that's the best way of dealing with this fear of rejection. Jesus tells his disciples, you can expect it. If you're going to follow me, you're going to be rejected. So expect it. Growing up, my sister and I, we took pride in trying to scare each other. We would do it all the time. She would go to the bathroom, and I would quietly try to sneak in front of the bathroom door, and then she'd open it, and I would say, ah, and try to scare her. And 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't work. And my sister would do the same thing to me. She would hide behind the bedroom door, and I'd walk in. She would reach out and grab me and, yell, and 9 times out of 10, I'd be scared. She would get me. She was really good at that. But from time to time, she would be hiding behind her door, and I'd see her toes poking out. And I'd say something to the effect of, Rochelle, hey, I can see you can't scare me this time. Ha, got you. And she would still jump out, and, well, she's bigger, so she could still scare me. But I knew that it was there. I knew that it was there. When I saw her toes, I knew what to expect. And most of the time, I really wasn't as scared as I would have been before. I wasn't fearful in that situation. I couldn't be fearful of something that I expected. And I believe that the fear of rejection works the same way. Christians should never fear rejection because we're already ahead of the game. See, we know what's coming because Jesus has already alerted us to rejection's toes sticking out from behind the door, ready to jump out and scare us. Jesus already let us know. We don't have to be afraid of rejection because we know it's coming. In the conversation that Jesus had with his disciples in John chapter 15 and 16, Jesus wasn't saying that we shouldn't get down or depressed or discouraged when we're rejected. Rather, I think he was saying these things because he knew that we would. He's having this conversation to explain to them how to recover or what to think when rejection happens. When rejection happens, we need to remember these things. Well, they rejected Jesus. They hated Jesus. They persecuted Jesus. They're going to happen to us, but we don't have to be afraid of them. I like how he concludes his conversation with his disciples in John chapter 16 and verse 33. Jesus says to them, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." I have overcome the world. We can only have peace through Jesus. And in the world, there is going to be tribulation. But we can be of good cheer because Jesus has already overcome. We can overcome this as well. But, let's face it. Fear of being rejected is something that is really hard to overcome. It's a natural fear that most people have. The fear of rejection causes children to go along with the crowd and pick on the one odd kid in the room. The fear of rejection causes us not to speak up when a coworker says a dirty or questionable joke. Fear of rejection causes us not to want to talk to our family members, even though they may be living in lives of sin. The fear of rejection discourages some of us to ask even just one person for a Bible study. This fear is so debilitating that even some of God's prophets in the Old Testament were affected by it. They had a fear of being rejected. I'd like to look at Isaiah chapter 8. Isaiah chapter 8. In the first 10 verses of Isaiah chapter 8, Isaiah is prophesying against Israel. Isaiah gets the pleasure of telling the nation that you've been bad. You've been told time after time, correct yourselves. God is sending the Assyrians to come and destroy you. Now, I don't know about you, but I know if I went out and was trying to make friends, that's probably not what I would say to them. Telling your friends bad news all the time is going to get you rejected. If you go up to them and say, hey, you're living this way, you're going to be rejected. So God foresaw that. God foresaw that this was going to happen to Isaiah. So starting in verse 11, God had something to say to him, something reassuring. For the Lord spoke thus to me with a strong hand, and instructed me that I should not walk in the way of this people. Just like us today, we're not to walk in the way of the people, we're not of the world. Verse 12, do not say a conspiracy concerning all that this people call conspiracy, nor be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled. For the Lord of hosts, him you shall hallow. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. He will be as a sanctuary, but a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense to both houses of Israel, as a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble, and they shall fall and be broken, be snared and taken. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, and I will wait on the Lord, who hides his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Here I am, and the children whom the Lord has given me. We are for signs and wonders in Israel, from the Lord of hosts, who dwells in the Mount of Zion. God reassures Isaiah. He tells him, do not be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled. The Lord of hosts, him shall you hallow. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. Satan wants us to have this fear of rejection. Satan wants us to be afraid to talk to our friends, to our neighbors, to our coworkers about the truth. So he encourages this fear of rejection. Don't let the fear of rejection get in the way of you going therefore and making disciples, as we read in the end of Matthew. We don't have to be fearful of rejection. Don't fear it, expect it, and know that God is on your side, just like he was for Isaiah. Another major fear that much of the world has is called necrophobia, or the fear of death. The fear of death. In a recent study, it's been suggested that 68% of Americans have some level of fear of dying. And I think we can all understand that. That makes a lot of sense. We do so much to stay alive. We have laws that keep us safe, that keep us alive. We have medicine that heals us when we're sick, so that way we can stay alive. We have countless safety features in our cars, and we buy them to make sure that they keep us alive when we get in accidents. We have safety features in our homes to keep people out, keep us safe, keep us alive. Everywhere we go, this building, we do so many things to keep us alive. And it makes sense. From the time that we're born, we're told to do things that keep us alive. If I see Isaac Isbell climbing a bookcase, I'm going to yell at them and tell them to get down because I'm trying to keep them alive. And then they learn to do that on their own. We've all been through that before. Our parents tell us not to stick our fingers in the outlets, keep us alive. So from the time that we were born, we've been taught, do whatever you can to stay alive. So it makes sense that we have a fear of death when we're told so many times to avoid it. But again, to overcome any fear, we must gain a proper perspective and clarity about that fear, because I believe that even the fear of death can be something that is debilitating for us. To gain that perspective, I would like to go to John chapter 11. John chapter 11. We're going to start at verse 1. This is the story of Jesus and Lazarus. Jesus and Lazarus. John chapter 11, verse 1. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, in the town of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. Now let's stop right there. Lazarus had more than just a cold. Lazarus didn't just have a little cough or a sore throat or a runny nose. That wouldn't make any sense. They wouldn't run to Jesus and tell him that Lazarus is sick if that's all it was. No, they were here to report that Lazarus is sick. He's on the brink of death, and he's the one whom you love. You need to know this. Let's keep reading. Verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Now that doesn't make too much sense to me. This is the one that he loves. These people just told him, urgently came to him and said, hey, your friend, the one who you loved, is sick. And he stays where he was. If you read the end of chapter 10, we find out that he is on the other side of the Jordan, and Bethany's on the other side. So he's a bit of a ways away. But he stays there 2 more days before he decides to do anything. He doesn't have the sense of urgency that everyone else seems to have in this situation. Let's keep reading. Verse 6. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews have sought to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after he said them, after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him. Then the disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. And this makes a lot of sense. If Jesus said, hey, when it's okay, Lazarus is asleep, I would have had the same response. Okay, good. Lazarus is asleep. Maybe he's sleeping off his cold. He's going to get better. And Jesus goes on. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought he was speaking about taking a rest and sleep. Makes sense. Then Jesus says to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. So Lazarus is dead. And Jesus said that he sleeps. And we know the rest of the story. Jesus goes, he heals Lazarus from the dead. He brings him back from the dead. They send to the Pharisees. And then from that point on, the Pharisees seek to kill him. So Jesus explains that to the disciples that Lazarus is doing more than just sleeping. Lazarus is dead. Why would Jesus say that Lazarus is asleep and not just plainly come out and just say Lazarus is dead? When I first read it, it doesn't make sense to me. Why would he seek to create this type of confusion? Once again, I believe that Jesus was trying to shift the focus of the disciples from the thought of the physical to the spiritual. As humans, I think we fail to do that very often. Sometimes we fail to realize that our eternal souls are looking out of our physical bodies into a physical world. We are living an eternal life right now. Death is simply the ending of our physical body, and our souls will always continue to live on. We don't have to fear death. Death is not something that we have to fear. Our bodies will expire, yes, and they will return to the dust that it's made out of, but our soul will continue to live on forever. And we need to remember that we are living eternity right now. The only thing that death does is change the location in which we're living. And Jesus was making this clear. Lazarus was asleep. Acts chapter 7 and verse 60 tells us that Stephen fell asleep when he was stoned. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 20 tells us that Christ is risen from the dead and has become the first fruits of those who are fallen asleep. We don't have to fear death because Jesus has destroyed him who had the power of death and has released us from being bonded to that fear, as Hebrews 2, verses 14 through 15. Christians, one day we will close our eyes, and the next we will open them, and we'll be in a place far better than this. We don't have to fear death. Death will happen, but it's just a going to sleep, and we'll wake up somewhere else. Satan wants us to worry about this. Satan wants us to be fearful of death, but we always need to remember the words of the song that we just sung. This world is not our home. We're just a passing through. There's no need to fear death as long as we're prepared. Finally, the state of this country seems to be eroding every single day. We have laws that have been passed that encourage immorality. Violence seems to be ever closer to our homes, right here in Orlando. Options for president seem to be lackluster. If you want to write in my name in November 8th, it might be a better idea. Many would say that this country is in decline, but some of us have a fearful look of the future. It causes us to worry. It causes us to be anxious, and understandably so. I think once again, Satan has used these things to distract us with fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the unknown of the future, especially when it comes to the future of this country. Sometimes I believe we get worked up and flustered over the degradation of morality in this nation. And we should. There is much work that needs to be done. But at times we forget where God fits in the big picture. I'd like to read Psalms chapter 33. Psalms chapter 33. We're going to begin reading at verse 10. You can be very fearful looking out at the world and this country and seeing the direction that it's going in. Psalm chapter 33, beginning at verse 10. The Lord brings the counsel of nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the people of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever. The plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. And a lot of times we read verse 12 and we stop there. But I do think it's important to remember verses 10 and 11 too. The counsel of the Lord stands forever. The Lord is in control. The Lord is in control. There is nothing above him. Continuing verse 13. The Lord looks from heaven and sees all the sons of men. From the place of his dwelling he looks on all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashions their hearts individually and considers all their works. No king is saved by the multitude of an army. A mighty man is not delivered by great strength. A horse is a vain hope for safety, neither shall it deliver any by its great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those whose hope is in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let your mercy, O Lord, be upon us, just as we hope in you. The Lord is watching. The Lord is watching. And he's watching those who fear him. He's watching those who love him, even during the time of famine. As Christians, we have nothing to fear when it comes to the events of this nation. No matter what laws are passed, we're still charged to go out and make disciples. No matter what president we have, we'll still be here to stand up for what is right. No matter what happens in this country, we must always fear him and continue to have hope in his mercy. No matter what happens, we will follow the Lord, because he's the one who makes the nations. He is in control. Psalm chapter 37, verse 28. Psalm chapter 37, verse 28. For the Lord loves justice and does not forsake his saints. They are preserved forever, but the descendants of the wicked will be cut off. As long as we continue to strive for righteousness in our lives, God will not forsake us. We don't have to fear. We don't have to fear all these things that are going on around us as long as we are living righteous lives. Proverbs 2 and verse 8 tells us, he guards the paths of justice and preserves the ways of his saints. We don't know the future of this country, and the outlook may look grim. That can be very taxing on us, but we shouldn't fear. We don't have to fear it, because God is on our side. Let us always remember the character of God. He is good. He's just, he's sovereign, he's wise, and he's loving. We don't have to be fearful of the future. We don't have to be fearful of the state of this country. But we should pray without ceasing and stay on the path of righteousness, so that way our way will be preserved. We could go on and explain so many fears that we have, and we could continue down that path about all the fears that we have and why we really shouldn't let those things get to us, why we shouldn't fear those things. However, I think it would be more expedient to consider the other side of the coin, what we should fear. And I submit to you this evening that there are only two things that we need to fear: losing your soul and the one who can take it from you. Jesus told his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, in verse 28, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Fear him who is able to destroy both body and soul in hell. We don't have to fear man. We don't have to fear what man can do. Man can only destroy the body. But we need to fear the one who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Man or nothing on this earth should ever make us afraid. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25, tells us the fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord will be safe. Some may say that this idea of fearing God contradicts 1 John chapter 4 and verse 18, 1 John chapter 4 and verse 18, which says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love." I don't think these are two conflicting ideas. I think this verse perfectly describes what we've been discussing this whole evening. Fear, yes, fear involves torment. When we're fearful of rejection, when we're fearful of death, when we're fearful for the state of this country, when we're fearful of all these things that we're afraid of, yes, that will torment our minds. And Satan wants us to be fearful of the things in this world. He wants us to be fearful of the wars of ISIS, Ebola, and all these things. But once we stop fearing these things and refocus our minds and trust God and fear Him, the one who controls our soul, then we can become perfect in love. That's what this verse is saying. Proverbs 9, verses 10 through 11, Psalms 111 and verse 10, Proverbs 1 and verse 7, they all say the same thing. It's stated time and time again in the Bible. All those verses tell us the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. One of my favorite verses is Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 10. Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 10. There God says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Isn't that good to consider? Isn't that just so wonderful to think about and to consider? God says, "I am your God. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." We have nothing to fear but God. But God. We don't have to fear rejection. We don't have to fear death. We don't have to fear the unknown of the uncertainty of the future. We don't have to fear these things because God is with us. We don't have much to fear. We can live happy lives in this world, as we talked about this morning. We can find happiness through working. We can find happiness when we suffer. We have nothing to fear but God Himself. No longer should we listen to these fears that deceive us. No longer should we fall victim to fear and its paralyzing grasp. Don't fear the rejection of men, but fear the rejection of Jesus on that final judgment day. Don't fear coming forward and confessing your sin, but fear the inevitable separation from God if you live in your sins. Don't fear the fiery darts of Satan, but fear the one who makes the armor that prevails against Satan. Don't fear death, but be fearful in serving the one preparing a place for you once death occurs. Fear God. We don't have to fear the things of this life. They're passing. We need to fear the one who is eternal. If you're here this evening and you haven't put on Christ in the water we gave of baptism, then you have much to fear this evening. Your soul is in danger. You need to worry about death because your soul is in danger. Consider that. If you're a Christian and you've wandered from the straight and narrow, then you likewise have much to fear too. Let tonight be the night that you stop living with these misplaced fears, but start living in the fear and reverence of the Creator and Keeper of your soul. That's the most important thing. It's tantamount that we keep that in mind, that we live in fear and reverence of the Creator and Keeper of our soul. If anyone needs the prayers of the church, if you have fears, if there's anything that you need, if you'd like to put on Christ in baptism, please come forward as we stand and sing for your encouragement.